right, so full self-driving cars, they're in the news all the time these days. But I feel like there's a lot of hype, and it's hard to know what's real and what's still science fiction. So we got a stack of articles here, all about the latest developments in FSD technology. We're going to try to break it all down for you. Who's leading the race? What are the big challenges? And when can we actually expect to see these things on our streets?
Yeah, and one thing that's important to keep in mind is that despite what you might hear from some of the more enthusiastic companies out there, no one has actually achieved level 5 autonomy yet.
Level 5.
Yeah, that's like the holy grail of self-driving. It means the car can handle literally any situation in any environment without any human input.
So basically a car that can drive itself everywhere, all the time, no matter what.
Exactly. But we're not there yet. Most of the systems we see today are at level 2 or 3.
Okay, so what does that mean?
Well, the Society of Automotive Engineers, or SAE, they have this scale for measuring autonomy. And level 2 and 3, they basically mean that the car can assist with certain driving tasks, like lane keeping, adaptive cruise control, even changing lanes in some cases.
So like those autopilot features you see on some cars.
Yeah, exactly. But it's important to remember that those systems still require the driver to be engaged and ready to take over at any moment.
So they're not truly self-driving then?
Right. They're more like advanced driver assistance systems. But the terminology can be a little confusing.
For sure. It seems like everyone's using the term self-driving these days, even when it's not really accurate.
It's all about marketing, right? But anyway, back to the levels. Level 4 autonomy is where things start to get really interesting. That's when the car can actually drive itself in certain conditions without any human intervention.
Like those driverless taxis we've been hearing about.
Exactly. But the key here is certain conditions. It might be limited to a specific geographic area or a certain type of road or even certain weather conditions.
So, not quite ready to take me on a cross-country road trip just yet.
Not quite, no.
Okay, so we've got these different levels of autonomy. But who are the big players in this race to develop fully self-driving cars?
Well, one company that everyone's talking about is Tesla, of course.
Right, they've been pushing their FSD beta program pretty hard.
Yeah, and their approach is interesting. They're relying heavily on artificial intelligence and computer vision.
So basically, teaching the car to drive by, showing it tons of data.
Yeah, they have a massive fleet of vehicles out on the roads collecting data all the time. And they're using that data to train their AI algorithms. It's a very data-driven approach.
Sounds impressive. But also a little risky, right? I mean, they're essentially using their customers as beta testers.
Yeah, there's definitely been some controversy around that. Some experts are concerned about the safety implications of putting this technology on public roads before it's fully proven.
Yeah, I can see that. So Tesla is taking this AI-heavy approach. Who else is in the running?
Another major player is Waymo, which is a subsidiary of Alphabet. They've been working on self-driving technology for even longer than Tesla, and they're known for their very rigorous safety standards.
And I think they're actually the only company that's operating a fully driverless taxi service right now, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right. They have a fleet of autonomous vehicles operating in a few cities like Phoenix, Arizona.
So they're taking a more cautious approach than Tesla, maybe?
I think it's fair to say that. They're focusing on building trust and proving the safety of their technology before they scale it up.
Makes sense. Any other big names we should know about?
Another one to watch is Cruise, which is backed by General Motors. They're also focusing on developing self-driving taxis, and they've got a lot of resources behind them.
So it's kind of a three-way race between Tesla, Waymo, and Cruise.
I think that's a fair assessment. But there are also a lot of other companies working on this technology. It's a very competitive space.
And a global one, right?
Absolutely. Don't forget about the Chinese companies, like Baidu, for example. They're making huge strides in FSD development.
I've heard that China is actually ahead of the U.S. in some areas of this technology.
Yeah, they have a very supportive regulatory environment and a massive domestic market. So they're definitely a force to be reckoned with.
It's amazing how quickly this technology is advancing. But it also seems like there's still some pretty big hurdles to overcome.
Oh, yeah, for sure. There are a lot of challenges, both technical and non-technical.
Like what?
Well, on the technical side, one of the biggest challenges is dealing with what we call edge cases.
Edge cases.
Yeah, those are those unusual or unexpected situations that don't happen very often. But when they do, they can be really difficult for self-driving systems to handle.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Imagine a car is driving down the road, and suddenly a child runs out into the street chasing a ball. Or a construction worker is directing traffic with hand signals. These are situations that are hard even for human drivers to handle. And it's even more challenging for an AI system that's been trained on data from more typical driving scenarios.
Right, so it's not just about teaching the car to follow the rules of the road. It also has to be able to react to these unpredictable events.
Exactly. And that requires a level of sophistication in AI decision-making that we're still working on.
And I imagine the AI also has to be able to deal with different weather conditions.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. Rain, snow, fog, even bright sunlight can all interfere with the sensors that self-driving cars use to perceive the environment.
So it's not enough to just test these cars in perfect conditions.
Nope, they need to be able to handle everything that the real world can throw at them, and that's a tall order.
It sounds like it. So we've talked about the technical challenges. What about the non-technical ones?
Well, one of the biggest non-technical challenges is public perception.
Meaning people are scared of self-driving cars.
Yeah, there's a lot of fear and distrust of this technology.
I guess it's understandable. I mean, it's a big leap of faith to put your life in the hands of a machine.
It is. And there have been some high-profile accidents involving self-driving cars, which hasn't helped.
Right, those accidents tend to make headlines.
They do, and they erode public trust in the technology.
So how do we overcome that?
Well, one way is to focus on transparency. Companies need to be open and honest about the capabilities and limitations of their technology, and they need to be upfront about any accidents or incidents that occur.
So basically, no more overhyping the technology.
Exactly. We need to manage expectations and build trust gradually.
Makes sense. Anything else?
Another important factor is regulation.
Meaning we need clear rules and standards for self-driving cars.
Exactly. Right now, the regulatory landscape is still very fragmented. Different countries and states have different laws, and that's creating uncertainty for both companies and consumers.
So we need some kind of global consensus on how to regulate this technology.
I think that would be ideal. It would level the playing field for companies, and it would give consumers more confidence that these cars are safe.
I agree. So technical challenges, public perception, regulation. It sounds like there's a lot of work to do before we see truly self-driving cars on the roads.
There is, but progress is being made, and I am optimistic that we'll get there eventually.
I hope you're right. I'm excited to see what the future holds for this technology, but for now, I think I'll stick to driving myself.
Probably a wise choice. For now.
So where do we go from here in this deep dive into full self-driving tech?
Well, we've talked about the companies, the challenges, and the current state of the technology, but in part two, I think it would be interesting to explore some of the potential societal impacts of this technology.
Like how self-driving cars could change the way we live and work.
Exactly, and how it could affect things like urban planning, the environment, and even our personal relationships.
That's fascinating.
It is. It's a topic with a lot of potential implications, and it's one that's worth thinking about carefully.
I'm looking forward to diving into that in part two.
Me too.
So stay tuned for more of our deep dive into full self-driving tech. We'll be back soon with part two.
Tuning in today for listening in your own way, exploring with your open mind. In our dive, you'll treasures find, mysteries untangled here.
Welcome back.
All right, so in part one, we got a handle on who's who in the self-driving world and all the tech challenges.
Right, like how do you teach a car to handle a kid running into the street or, crazy weather?
Exactly. But now I kind of want to step back and look at the bigger picture. Like what happens after this technology actually takes off?
Yeah, what if it really does change everything?
Exactly. What are the implications for jobs, for example?
Oh, that's a big one. A lot of people are worried about that, and understandably so.
Right, because we're talking about a lot of drivers.
Millions of them, truck drivers, taxi drivers, delivery drivers.
And those jobs could just disappear.
Well, it's not that simple. It's not like overnight everyone's out of work.
Yeah.
But the transition is going to be tough for sure. And we need to be thinking, and now W, about how to support those workers.
Like retraining programs, maybe.
Exactly, and things like safety nets.
Because we can't just ignore the human cost of all this progress.
Absolutely.
Okay, so jobs are one big concern. What about privacy? These cars are collecting tons of data, right?
Oh yeah, they're basically data gathering machines on wheels.
And that's going to be a little creepy, right?
It definitely raises some concerns.
Who has access to that data? And what are they doing with it?
Right. Are they selling it to advertisers?
Or is the government tracking our every move?
All valid questions. We need really clear rules about data privacy.
And who's responsible for it?
Exactly. And speaking of responsibility, what about accidents?
Oh yeah, that's a big one. If a self-driving car crashes, who's to blame?
Is it the manufacturer? The software developer? The person who owns the car? These are tricky legal questions.
Yeah, it's uncharted territory.
Totally.
So we've got these ethical and legal issues to figure out. But let's get back to the impact on society. How do you think self-driving cars will change our cities?
Oh, that's an exciting one to think about.
Because if we don't need all these parking spaces,
That's right. Imagine all that space freed up.
we could have more parks, more green space.
Wider sidewalks, bike lanes.
Our cities could be so much more livable.
Totally. We could even rethink how we design buildings.
Oh, yeah. We wouldn't need those massive parking garages anymore.
Exactly. We could build more housing, more community spaces.
It's a really exciting vision. But I guess there are potential downsides too, right?
Of course. There's always the risk that this technology could exacerbate existing inequalities.
Like, what if only rich people can afford these self-driving cars?
Right, or what if these mobility services only operate in wealthy neighborhoods? We need to make sure that everyone benefits from this technology.
Not just the privileged few.
Exactly.
And what about the impact on our sense of freedom? I mean, a lot of people love driving.
That's a great point. For some people, driving is a symbol of independence and control over their own destiny.
And taking that away could be a big psychological shift.
It could. We might see a backlash against self-driving cars from people who want to hold on to that sense of freedom.
It's interesting to think about all these unintended consequences.
It is. We're talking about a technology that could fundamentally change the way we live. And it's important to consider all the potential implications, both positive and negative.
Well said. So we've covered a lot of ground here: jobs, privacy, legal issues, the impact on our cities. But I feel like we've only scratched the surface,
I agree. There's so much more to explore.
which is why we have a part 3,
Yeah.
where we're going to get even more speculative.
That's right. We're going to ask some really big what-if questions about the future of transportation, artificial intelligence, and even the role of humans in a world increasingly shaped by technology.
It's going to be a wild ride.
Buckle up.
Okay, so we've talked about the companies building these things, all the challenges they face, and even some of the potential downsides. But now I want to I don't know, let's have some fun with this. Let's imagine for a second that this tech actually lives up to the hype.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Yeah, like what happens if self-driving cars really do change the world?
I mean, one of the biggest questions is what happens to car ownership?
You mean, will people even need to own cars anymore?
Exactly.
Because if I can just summon a robotaxi whenever I need one, why bother with all the hassle and expense of owning a car?
Right, especially in cities. It just might not make sense. I mean, you could just subscribe to some kind of mobility service. Need a car to go to the store? Boom, there it is. Going on a road trip? A different kind of car shows up.
So it's less about owning a car and more about just having access to one whenever you need it.
Exactly. It's like transportation as a utility.
Kind of like electricity or the internet.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
And if that happens, I mean, think about all the industries that would be disrupted.
Oh yeah, car manufacturers, dealerships, parking garages, gas stations.
Even mechanics, right?
Yeah, the whole landscape would change.
That's wild to think about. But let's go even bigger. What could this mean for our cities?
I mean, just imagine if all the streets weren't lined with parked cars.
All that space we could reclaim.
We could have more parks, more green space, wider sidewalks.
Yeah, make our cities more walkable, more bikeable.
Exactly, more people-centric.
And think about the buildings.
We wouldn't need to build those massive parking garages anymore.
Well, we could have more housing, more businesses, more community spaces.
The possibilities are kind of endless.
It's a really exciting vision. But I also can't help but think, like, what could go wrong?
Oh, yeah, there are definitely potential downsides.
Like what?
Well, one concern is that these mobility services could end up being controlled by a few powerful companies.
So instead of being reliant on car companies, we're reliant on tech companies.
Yeah, and they could set prices, limit access to certain areas, even use the data they collect to influence our behavior.
That sounds a little dystopian.
It's a risk, for sure.
So how do we avoid that?
Strong regulations, antitrust laws, data privacy protections.
So basically, we need to be really careful about how we implement this technology.
Exactly. We need to be proactive, not reactive.
I mean, the technology itself isn't inherently good or bad.
Right.
It's all about how we choose to use it.
I completely agree.
Which leads to another interesting question. What if self-driving cars are just the beginning?
What do you mean?
Like, what if this is just a small taste of what AI is capable of?
Oh, yeah. That's a whole other rabbit hole.
Because the same technology that's making self-driving cars possible could be applied to all sorts of other things, right?
Absolutely.
Healthcare, education, manufacturing.
Even creative fields.
So this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Potentially, yeah.
And that raises even bigger questions about, like, the future of work.
And the nature of intelligence. And what it even means to be human in a world where machines can do so many of the things that we do.
Whoa. Those are some heavy questions.
They are.
I think we're going to need a whole other deep dive series to even scratch the surface of that.
I agree.
But for now, let's maybe bring it back down to earth a little bit and leave our listeners with one final thought. If machines can do all these things, what's left for us humans to do?
Right, what's our role in this future?
I mean, will we embrace leisure and creativity, focus on things that AI can't replicate? Or will we struggle to find meaning and purpose in a world where so many of our traditional roles have become obsolete?
It's a question each of us is going to have to grapple with.
Yeah, it's a little unsettling, to be honest.
It is.
But also incredibly fascinating. This whole idea of a future shaped by AI.
It's a future that's coming, whether we're ready for it or not.
And it's one that we need to start thinking about now. So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of full self-driving tech. It's been a wild ride. And we hope you'll stick with us as we continue to explore the future of technology and its impact on our lives.
Thanks for listening.
Tuning into